Hello guys, and welcome to my new video, and today we're looking at the most fun healers in patch 10.1 because guess what, I've tested every single healer on PTR and this is going to be my tier list or ranking in terms of which healers I enjoyed the most. And it's also important to note that I do spend a lot of time testing healers, a lot of time editing videos and things like that, and if you enjoyed this type of content, please like and subscribe because this will allow me to continue this type of content in the future. This is a very personal question. There is no right or wrong answers when it comes to fun because everyone is going to be different, but so many of you have asked me this question. A lot of the times they'll be like, hey MadSkillz, if every healer was completely equal in terms of HPS, in terms of everything, which healer would be the most fun for you? And I think that is the main theme of the video because I hope to give you an insight into every healer, into patch 10.1 in terms of new tier sets, in terms of how they might possibly play in the next patch, and let you decide which healer you want to main or which healer you find the most fun. And on top of that, I'm going to be ranking healers for Mythic Plus and raids because a lot of the times a healer that I enjoy in Mythic Plus, I might not enjoy them as much in raid situations, and I'm trying to explain my reasoning behind that. So let's go and get started with the tier list. So you can see here, these are all the healers, and I'm going to start off again. S tier is going to mean the healer that I enjoyed the most, and D tier is going to be a healer that I did not have a lot of fun. And I'm probably going to start off with S tier, but honestly I don't think I really have an S tier healer right now because I do enjoy most healers out there. For the time being, I'm going to be placing Restoration Shaman here, and there is a big caveat to this because I really found Resto Shaman to be very interesting in Mythic Plus, but I found Resto Shaman to be less interesting in raid environments, and I still decided to place it as A tier. And why is that? In Mythic Plus, I really enjoy Restoration Shaman because I do love the simplistic rotation, simplistic DPS rotation, simplistic healing rotation, but the fact that you have so many utility buttons, I think it kind of evens out. The fact that you have things like Master of the Elements, which means that you can weave in a lot of your DPS abilities for more damage or healing. For example, things like Lava Burst followed by something like Healing Rain, especially with something like Nature Swiftness to allow an instant cast Healing Rain, and then that is also going to deal damage because you'll have talents like Acid Rain, which honestly has changed the class for me. I think Acid Rain is such a simple fix, but it has provided some deep, meaningful rotational changes for Mythic Plus, because right now in Dragonflight as Resto Shaman, you are using Healing Rain and Chain Heal as one of your main sources of your bread and butter abilities, which is very different when you look at previous expansions in the past. Resto Shaman is definitely the most fun healer for me in Mythic Plus because of all those aspects. I think you have a lot of carry potential, especially in puck situations, because Resto Shaman is arguably one of the best interrupts when compared to other healers. You have things like AoE Stun, you have Knock Up with Thunderstorm, you have Purge, you have Curse Dispel, and you have Poison Dispel with Poison Cleansing Totem, which has been fixed in patch 10.07 and feels a lot better. And hey, I forgot about the healing. What about the fact that you're getting Tidebringer, and when you're combining Tidebringer with something like High Tide, your chain heal is gonna feel so powerful. Long gone are the days where you would press chain heal and you'd be like, wow, did that just hit one person? Right now with Tidebringer, that is rarely ever going to happen, and I think it is such a refreshing change because it's not only just chain heal spam, you still have a lot of things that you can weave in, and you have pretty nice DPS rotation, and then on top of that you have a bunch of utility spells, and I think that creates or combines to make Resto Shaman a pretty solid healer or interesting healer in Mythic Plus. And hey, did I mention about the insane amount of passive healing that you're getting from things like Earth Shield? Because with Earth and Harmony and Surging Shield's talent, your Earth Shield is going to feel extremely powerful, and it's just basically something that you have to maintain, and then that leaves you with a lot of time to DPS and heal. But what about raiding in terms of Restoration Shaman? I do think Resto Shaman is a little bit more complicated in raids because you most likely will get a couple of new additional buttons to press in terms of, hey, you might be using Totemic Recall, you might be using something like Earth and Wall Totem, you might be using even Wellsprings you can squeeze in depending on which talent build you're running. So sometimes I feel like Resto Shaman might even have too many abilities in raid situations, especially considering that still the majority of your healing might be coming from chain heal. Tier set does seem interesting in terms of what it provides. I think the 2 set can provide a lot of overhealing because if you're running Acid Rain, you'll be using Healing Rain on cooldown because you don't want to miss out on the damage from Acid Rain, which means the 2 set bonus might provide a little bit more overhealing than you want to. But this could also lead to an interesting talent builds in raids because Resto Shaman has quite a few talent builds available in raid situations with Riptide build, with Chain Heal build, and now with the new tier set, you might be running a build that allows you to have as many riptides as possible, but possibly also buffing your chain heal. And again, these are just my speculations. It does not mean it's going to go live like that in 10.1, but overall I think Restoration Shaman is a pretty full or fulfilling healer in Mythic Plus environment, and I think it is okay or interesting in raid situations because you have so many different builds available, and I think it is going to be wild west in 10.1 in terms of the new tier set, possibly changing your builds in a significant way. Now the next heal I'm going to be including here is going to be Restoration Druid. I'm going to be placing it in A tier, which again, I always enjoyed Resto Druid in Mythic Plus and raids. I've always enjoyed that healing over time type of gameplay because you either hate it or love it. You have to really get familiar with that hot type of playstyle. Again, I could place Resto Shaman here as well. I'm still not sold on it. But why is Resto Druid an always interesting choice for me? Because again, in Mythic Plus environments, Resto Druid has arguably one of the most complex DPS rotations out there. Possibly too complex if you really want to min-max your DPS, because again, a lot of the times you have to min-max DPS as a healer if you're doing high-end content. I really like the fact that you can do some kitty weaving, apply your bleeds, apply your dots with Moonfire, Sunfire, and then go back to healing with your hot type of playstyle. I think it all kind of weaves in and it provides a lot of synergy between DPS and HPS. You also have abilities like Nature's Vigil, which is honestly relatively interesting because you can provide a ton of damage as Resto Druid without having to do any DPS, and I think that type of passive DPS playstyle is relatively cool because it does lead to an interesting optimization. I do feel that sometimes you end up overhealing just for the sake of adding DPS, which can sometimes feel a little bit wrong. In terms of the new tier set for Resto Druid for patch 10.1, it has been nerfed. A lot of people were complaining about this. I still think it provides interesting interaction in terms of how you're going to use your Flourish ramps. I do think because your uptime of Flourish is going to be higher with the tier set, this fits those rot type fight a lot better. And at the end of the day, Resto Druid always felt interesting for me in raid situations. A lot of people tend to put down Resto Druid's complexity because they say like, hey, it's just rejuvenation and wild growth, which to some extent it is, but if you don't prepare for damage, if you don't know the damage patterns, you will suffer as Resto Druid. For example, I love combining Tree of Life procs from Reforestation with something like Convoke. It really feels very rewarding. On top of that, you have a bunch of cooldowns in terms of Convokes, Flourish, and Tranquilities, which you have to pre-ramp or prepare for those cooldowns, and you have to kind of allocate them in the right locations because a lot of the times you're healing, you need to know where the damage is happening because you need to prepare, you need to pre-hot, you need to anticipate damage in order to maximize your Resto Druid, which means that it has additional complexity. You can't play Resto Druid by just pressing Rejuvenation and Wild Growths, but you're not going to get the same HPS versus another Druid who knows what they're doing. So generally, I think the fact that Resto Druid is a healer that can be relatively easy to pick up, but really hard to master or has a relatively high skill ceiling makes it a fun healer for me. Now, the next healer that I'm going to be placing is going to be Mistweaver Monk. And honestly, I've always talked about Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver for me is the best melee healer in the game, or maybe not the best, but the most fun healer for me because I think Blizzard did an exceptional job designing this healer. I think there is so many nice and interesting and rewarding concepts to Mistweaver playstyle because I don't think there's any other healer that kind of compares to Mistweaver right now because so much of your healing can come from passive means in terms of Feline Stomp, in terms of Ancient Teachings, in terms of Rising Mist talent. I just feel it feels almost wrong when you can do so much damage or so much healing through your DPS in terms of fist weaving. And again, I am mainly talking about fist weaving because in my honest opinion, if you want to play Mistweaver, the main reason to play Mistweaver is to try that fist weaving build because there is so many other healers out there that have range capabilities that can heal or do better in terms of ranged healer than Mistweaver can. Fist weaving, in my honest opinion, is the way to go, and it is one of the most fun healing builds in the game. Again, we talked about Feline Stomp being such an integral part of Mistweaver Monk, and I think it's very, very interesting, especially in Mythic Plus environments or in raid environments where you're facing multiple enemies. There's multiple builds for Mistweaver available in terms of optimizing your HPS and DPS. I think to some extent you still have relatively few abilities that require you to hardcast because you can't have things like instant vivify every couple of seconds, and I think that is very, very interesting. I did try out Mistweaver in raids and Mythic Plus, and in terms of the new tier set, I think the 2-set bonus was kind of wild. Again, the 2-set bonus has been nerfed very, very recently, and I did not get to test it out, but during my testing before the nerf, I was able to get something like 200,000 mana in 3 minutes. I'm not sure how that's going to change with the recent nerf to the tier set, but I feel that it's pretty relevant to say that the Mistweaver mana issues are probably going to be a thing of the past in 10.1. Initially, when I was looking at the 2-set bonus, I was thinking like, hey, that's pretty lazy to just give you mana as a 2-set bonus, but my mind has kind of changed because you have to turn that extra mana that you gain from that 2-set bonus into HPS. And how can you do that? You might use something like a throughput potion instead of a mana potion. You might be casting or hard casting a lot more Vivifies in order to get that splash healing from Renewing Mist, in order to use up your mana and turn that into extra HPS. Honestly, I just think the whole playstyle of Mistweaver in raids and Mythic Plus, it just bodes and gels well together because you don't have a lot of limitations except for mana. When you compare it to something like a Holy Paladin, who's another melee healer, you do have to deal with holy power. I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of your healing for Mistweaver Monk is handled by the game, which means that you're left to your own devices in terms of optimizing your DPS rotation or your healing rotation or dodging those nasty mechanics. And I think the fact that Blizzard has paid a lot of attention to Mistweaver Monk since the start of Dragonflight, they've buffed Mistweaver Monk multiple times, they changed how Ancient Teachings works in 10.1, they've also added new abilities and new talents in terms of Shalon's Gift, which honestly feels very impactful in Mythic Plus environment. It can also feel impactful in raids. I think it feels rewarding to press, which only bodes well for the future of Mistweaver Monk. And I think if you're looking for a melee healer, I don't think there's any better melee healer than a Mistweaver Monk right now in Dragonflight, especially 10.1. Now let's move on to the next healer. I'm going to be talking about Discipline Priest, and I'm going to place Discipline Priest in B tier, and people might be like, what, B tier? You usually enjoy DPS healers, you enjoy DPS or healing through DPS abilities. And Discipline Priest for me in Mythic Plus is actually A tier, easy A tier. I actually really enjoy Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus content, but where it lets me down is raiding, and this is why I have to kind of evaluate and kind of place Discipline Priest in B tier. And again, let's talk about it. So testing Discipline Priest in 10.1 in terms of Mythic Plus felt really rewarding. I think it is a very fun healer. I've always gravitated towards healers that can do damage and heal through that damage, especially passively, because I think that's where Blizzard is kind of heading in terms of meta for healers in Raid and Mythic Plus. I think Discipline Priest in terms of shielding, in terms of Rapture, felt pretty interesting because that's one of the unique things that Discipline Priest can provide. Really strong shielding, especially during the moments of need, and that always felt like the strong niche of Discipline. Again, Absorbs were really strong in previous years, and that did get watered down in terms of Dragonflight, in terms of the whole Discipline Priest class. And it kind of makes sense because I think Blizzard is very scared about Discipline Priest having too strong Absorbs, because that is going to steal all of the healing from other healers. But one of the most interesting things about Discipline Priest in 10.1 is that they are getting buffs. They are getting mana reduction to a lot of their spells. Their resources are going to feel a lot better, and the tier set bonus is absolutely fantastic. Power Word Radiance feels insane. It feels like a legitimate group heal, and the fact that you can get it instant cast means that you can react to unexpected damage faster, which is a big deal for a healer that requires ramping up. So I've been having a blast with Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. I've been really enjoying the tier set. I've enjoyed the playstyle. I've enjoyed the whole new Shadow Covenant build because I do think it is an additional button to press, but I think it does feel rewarding in Mythic Plus situations. But for me, Discipline Priest falls down in raids. Now, I don't want people to hate me, but I don't really like that strict ramp rotation that Discipline Priest has. It's one of those healers where you need to know when damage is going to happen, and I think in Dragonflight, especially with additional buttons that you do get in raid situations versus Mythic Plus, for example, you'd probably be running Light's Wrath and maybe things like Evangelism in raid, which means your ramp rotation is going to be significantly stricter or harder. And I don't necessarily feel that more buttons equals more complexity or more fun. I actually feel that Discipline Priest could lose a couple of buttons in their ramp rotation to make it more enjoyable and more manageable. I think one of the most tilting things that can happen to you as Discipline Priest in raid situations is that when you do prepare for your big ramp, you have big ramps, you have small ramps, but when you're preparing for that big ramp and you have to move and you lose some of the button casts, it is so tilting. So while I enjoy Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus a lot, I do not have that much of a fun time with Discipline Priest in raid because it does feel very scientific. I'm not trying to bash on Discipline Priest. I think it requires a lot of skill. It requires you to really know the damage patterns. I think top players in the world are going to have an insanely fun time with Discipline Priest. I do think that Discipline Priest could use some dumbing down for boomers like me when it comes to raid situations. I don't think the complexity or more buttons equals more fun, but guys, let me know how you feel about this. This is something that I'm really interested in hearing your opinions. And the next hero that I'm going to be placing here is going to be Preservation Evoker. So why am I placing in B tier? And again, watch this space because I actually feel Preservation Evoker is going to climb higher in terms of my enjoyment of Evoker because of the tier set bonus, but that is going to require a bit more testing. But why is it being placed in B tier? Why did it drop ranks for me? Because I made a video at the start of Dragonflight and it was a lot higher. So in terms of Preservation Evoker, I think it did lose a lot of complexity in terms of the nerfs that it received. I think the fact that they nerfed temporal anomaly, echo scaling with things like Lifeline meant that your Emerald Communion ramps were significantly decreased in its potency, which meant that you might or possibly even lose out on certain cooldown that you could use previously at the start of Dragonflight, which kind of simplified the class for me. And I don't think Evoker needed more simplification, because I don't think Preservation Evoker is a very difficult healer to play in raids or Mythic Plus. I think its main complexity comes from the fact that it does have 30-yard range to majority of its heals, and that range or playing around that range can feel sometimes rewarding because, hey, I did a really good maneuver and I end up healing most of the people. But more often than not, the range limitations of Preservation Evoker makes you hate your range DPS, because if they're standing really spread out, the fact that most of your healing or a lot of your healing is dependent on your group's positioning can be really tilting depending on which situations you're facing, both in Mythic Plus and raids. So the fact that Preservation Evokers lost out on really big Emerald Communion ramps in raid situations, I can still live with that, but the possibility of Emerald Blossoms making a full comeback in 10.1, even the smidgen of a possibility, makes me really nervous, because I find Emerald Blossoms build to be a lot more boring than that Echo build. In my perfect world, if Blizzard can actually manage to make a build that uses both Emerald Blossoms and Echoes as a way of healing your raid group, I think that would be probably the best of both worlds. So just the possibility of Emerald Blossoms emerging in something like raid environments, the fact that you might not be running Stasis, which again, I feel Stasis added that much needed complexity to the class that already wasn't too complex. I think that build could be something that I don't really enjoy. Now, I also think there is a lot of saving grace in terms of the new tier set. I think the tier set is actually pretty good. And I think the 2-set bonus, it not only makes Dream Breath more powerful, which is extremely passive, but Spirit Bloom. You might have these Spirit Bloom ramps, something like this Priest have and things like that, in terms of, hey, you can apply as many echoes as possible on people and then cast Spirit Bloom. Spirit Bloom will add a hot to the targets that it hits and the targets that have echo, which feels like a pretty nice addition in terms of adding additional complexity to this healer. So even though I started off relatively negative in terms of Preservation Evoker, I do think the tier set could be interesting, and I think if there is going to be a hybrid build between Emerald Blossoms and Echoes, that could make it a very interesting healer. Right now, I don't know. There could be a possibility of people just going Emerald Blossoms, and that would be very boring for me. And that's why I have to place healer a little bit lower here. This is why I say watch this space, because Evoker could become more interesting to play, but only time will tell, and I can't wait to test out Evoker a bit more when patch 10.1 hits, when people find that best build to run. Now the next healer is going to be Holy Paladin. I'm going to place it in B tier, and honestly I've tested out Holy Paladin and I had a lot of fun with this healer that almost feels like a hybrid between melee and range. And I think Holy Paladin has a relatively simple rotation and it's not overburdened with abilities, which only makes the healer more fun for me. And I think Holy Paladin has a relatively simple but rewarding interaction or rotation between your single target heal, Word of Glory, and your AoE heals like Light of Dawn. Because with talents like Unending Light and Imperial Legacy, which means that you can cast things like Light of Dawn, which is going to empower both your next single target heal in terms of World of Glory, or you can cast things like Judgment, which means that your next World of Glory is going to cast a reduced power Light of Dawn. And I think it's a relatively simple and rewarding interaction that you can use both in raids and Mythic Plus. I also like the fact that a lot of people are running things like Beacon of Virtue in Mythic Plus environment in order to provide more group AoE heals, because you can sometimes lack that group AoE healing capabilities depending on which build you're running, depending on which content you're also trying to do. On top of that, I did test out the tier set bonus, and again the tier set bonus felt pretty okay depending on the situation, because it will empower one of your talents depending on which talent you pick. In my case, I was testing out a lot of Light's Hammer, and Light's Hammer, it is a telegraphed ability. It requires people to be somewhat stacked in terms of maximizing his HPS, but the fact that I was getting so many holy power generation from the tier set itself felt pretty nice in terms of turning that holy power into extra healing or extra DPS. And I do like the fact that a lot of people are trying out things like Avenging Crusader in raid environments, because you do feel like a true melee healer, because you will optimize or prioritize things like Judgment, Crusader Strike in order to heal your group. So even though I do find Holy Paladin an interesting and fun healer to play, and I think it does fall in that melee category, I do think that Mistweaver Monk feels a little bit more smooth or less restrictive when it comes to that melee healer playstyle, because you're not really limited by holy power generation. And the last healer is going to be Holy Priest, and honestly I was going to place Holy Priest a lot higher if this was just for raid environments, I probably would be placing Holy Priest somewhere in A tier because I had a blast playing Holy Priest in raid environments, but I think Holy Priest falls a little bit when it comes to Mythic Plus in terms of my enjoyment, but I'm going to be placing Holy Priest in B tier, and again, this doesn't really matter in terms of the order, but Holy Priest, what I liked and what I disliked about this healer in 10.1. So I did start Holy Priest in raid environments, and honestly I had a blast. It's been a while since I played Holy Priest, and I really like Miracle Worker. I really like different talent builds that are emerging for Holy Priest. I like the fact that you can weave in your Holy Word spells. You can cast Circle of Healing. If you have Prayer Circle talent, you can also be casting things like Prayer of Healing for additional AoE capabilities. And I think these little combos felt simple but intriguing, and I think there's a common theme coming throughout the video because I like these simplistic chain abilities that you can use in order to maximize your HPS. I think talents like Miracle Work and Divine Image, they can read somewhat passive in terms of what they provide, but I think they can provide a lot of min-maxing capabilities if you want to really optimize your HPS as Holy Priest in raid situations. And also the tier set, honestly, it's pretty crazy. It has been nerfed, but the fact that the 2-set bonus, and I have to mention this multiple times here, I do think Holy Priest is probably the best healer for new healers entering World of Warcraft because of the fact in 10.1 you're getting a 2-set bonus that is going to amplify significantly the healing of your Prayer of Mending. The fact that you can press this button with very little afterthought in terms of Prayer of Mending, and that is going to provide you with so much free healing, felt relatively crazy because you're getting so much healing for so little effort. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards this simplicity because the tier set makes it a lot easier to, again, top HPS meters in terms of getting free healing from Prayer of Mending. And on the flip side, I did try out Holy Priest in Mythic Plus, and I do think that the Lightweaver build is a vast improvement over that Flash Concentration build in Shadowlands. And I do think Holy Priest will have few additional buttons to press in terms of Mythic Plus because you will pick few talents that will provide you with additional damage. Again, that is all depending on the build that you want to run. But I think the downside of Holy Priest is the fact that they don't really have a lot of passive healing through DPS, and I do enjoy a lot of healers that provide, again, you can heal through damage. That's something that appeals to me, and this is the reason why I didn't place Holy Priest higher, because in Mythic Plus I didn't really enjoy them as much as I would like. In raids I was pleasantly surprised. To summarize the whole video on the overall ranking of the healers in 10.1 in terms of fun, again, this is what you see on the screen. Don't take this list seriously. This is very personal. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. I wanted you to have a better idea of what healers feel like in terms of Mythic Plus and raids. Again, I might place Resto Shaman in A tier. I could place Discipline Priest higher because I really enjoy Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus, but I didn't really enjoy them in raids. So this list tries to take raid and Mythic Plus into account. If you're someone who just plays Mythic Plus, this list would be very, very different. Again, I'm not sold on a couple of healers. For example, I'm still waiting for Preservation Evoker in terms of what is going to be the best build emerging, especially with the tier set bonus, because ramping with Spirit Bloom actually appeals to me quite a lot. But at the same time, I also think Preservation Evoker has been simplified a lot because you might not be, again, Emerald Blossoms, you might not be running Stasis, you still don't have things like Emerald Communion, or it's not as powerful as it was before. This is a lot of speculation here. I'm not saying Emerald Blossoms is going to be the way to go for Preservation Evoker, but just the possibility of Emerald Blossoms appearing as the main build kind of scares me. So I do enjoy Resto Shaman a lot. I think it's one of the most fun healers in Mythic Plus. I don't think it is as fun in raid as it is in Mythic Plus, so I could place it in A tier. I think Resto Druid is always a solidly fun healer to play both in raids and Mythic Plus. It is easy to start off with, and it has a relatively high skill ceiling, which keeps you playing the game. And then Mistweaver for me is the most fun melee healer because I think it is so fun to have so much passive healing happening from you by just doing your DPS rotation, by just using talents like Feline Stomp, by just using things like Ancient Teachings, Rising Mist, things like that. I think the fact that you're getting rewarded from doing your melee DPS rotation is the right way to go. I think the tier set is relatively interesting. I think the fact that Mistweaver mana concerns are probably going to be eliminated in patch 10.1, and you're going to be looking at ways of, hey, how can I turn this mana into HPS, is actually a pretty interesting way of making a tier set. Initially, I was kind of disappointed about this, but now I'm kind of looking at this and I think it's intriguing. And then you'll notice things like Holy Paladin. I think Holy Paladin is actually a really solid and really fun healer to play, and I had a lot of fun both in raids and Mythic Plus. I'm still not 100% sold on the Holy Power limitations. I'm still not 100% vibing with the spec. I think there could be a couple of improvements made to Holy Paladin in terms of making it more rewarding in terms of the damage that you deal. And I think Blizzard has even made some of the changes in 10.1 for Holy Paladin to make it feel a little bit more like Mistweaver, because the new Avenging Crusader feels a little bit like ancient teachings for Mistweaver in 10.1. And Holy Priest, honestly, Holy Priest would have been a lot higher if I was looking at raids, but I don't really enjoy Holy Priest in Mythic Plus that much. I think Holy Priest isn't the best choice on this list for anyone who's looking for an easy healer to start in 10.1, because the fact is that the 2-set bonus for Holy Priest makes Prayer of Mending so insanely powerful, so much free healing for so little effort. Honestly, this is my list. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this, or videos about my predictions for, again, 10.1 Mythic Plus meta and raid meta. Let me know, and if you like this content, please like and subscribe, because it takes me forever to edit these videos. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video.